to Beyond Authentic Witchcraft, the Meandering Magical Podcast. I'm Lisa, a Liminal Witch, and
I'm Neil, a Chaos Magician.
And we do a monthly podcast on this here channel. Now, first things first. I don't know the exact quality of the recordings from both our ends today, because we are filming this when Neil's house is about to do a Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz and get sucked up into a cyclone.
So this could be the last podcast that I do.
Don't say that. Don't say that. What am I going to do for the rest of the year? No, honestly.
You put an RIP at the end.
Yeah. No, don't even joke about it. Good Lord. No, we don't need that bad juju out into the world. Thank you very much. But we wanted to do a podcast, obviously, and we were talking about what we were going to do for 2025, and we were talking about different subjects and different things. Now, one of the things that have got my goat recently, and it's how this subject's come up, is that I am getting mightily pissed off with the amount of gatekeeping within the online witchy communities, and the amount of people who will turn around and say, you can't do that because of the Wiccan read. You can't do that. It's an it harm none. You can't do that because this says you shouldn't be doing that. You should only do it this way. And I was like, I'm a witch. I'm not a Wiccan. And B, I'm a liminal witch. The clue is in the title. Like I've never, if I wanted to be part of a religion that had set rules, I would go and become a Seventh-day Adventist or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So that is what we're looking at today. Dogmatic gatekeeping and some of that sort of almost that two-facedness within the witchy community, where you want to be respected as a Wiccan and a spell practitioner, but you then look down upon other people for doing their version of magic. So that's what we're talking about today, Neil. So first of all, when I suggested this, it became apparent, and then just the precursor to filming, it became apparent that actually you haven't ever looked into Wicca, so it's not something that you're that particularly familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, I went down a whole rabbit hole. I mean, I kind of do this in general with magic subjects, but I've never done it with Wicca, because I mean, throughout my life, and kind of how my interest started was looking into Wicca, and I just went, oh, not for me, and then just kind of just left it. So yesterday I went a full deep dive into Wicca, and obviously I'm kind of more into how something starts and where it goes and what it spawns and all that. So I think I know quite a bit now, so I can kind of put things into perspective, because I mean, I've also seen it pops up a lot. I mean, you've seen it online, but I'm all about the books. And even when they're books that say maybe a chaos angle or a eclectic angle, there'll always be the Wiccan seeps in, and it's like, whoa, hang on. And it's almost like it just comes out of nowhere sometimes, and kind of starts putting me off as I'm reading, thinking, oh, okay, right, this is creeping in. And I think, my reservations about Wicca way back in the days, and then from reading about it recently, I'm like, okay, this is why I don't like it. It's not just a like, oh, Wicca, whatever. It's just there's obviously something about it that's kind of stuck with me enough to, when it pops up in a book, then it kind of puts me off a bit. And so yeah, I've done a lot of soul searching, kind of all this research. So yeah.
So I think that's really interesting, because obviously I when I came into witchcraft, it was via a lot of crystal work and auras and things like that I was seeing anyway. So it was kind of like that, and having my grandmother seeing spirits and having all of that just be normalized for me, and having the family history of, do you remember your great great grandmother was a what's it called, a parlor medium. I knew parlor maid. I was like, no, she wasn't a maid, a medium. Very different things, Lisa, very different things. But yeah, so it was like, that was just how we grew up. It was just part of, okay, so, in the same way that my grandfather was in the Navy, your grandmother's grandmother was a parlor medium. That's what she did. And it was like, okay, fair enough. There we go. That's it. So I kind of came into witchcraft through a really roundabout kind of way, where I'd had connections with an actual sort of coven that had links to the New Forest covens and all of that, and then met a bunch of people that were very much non-Wiccan, and were solitaries that also worked as groups together in little mini groups. So it was kind of like a magical community where if people's interests aligned, they would do some workings. And we tried for a little while to have a larger group along those sort of same ideas, and it never made it off because of egos. But there was always that element to it of, this is within a sort of almost like a parallel to Wicca. It was like, we're not doing that Wiccan thing, we're not following Wicca, but we're aware of it. So like Scott Cunningham's Living Wicca and Wicca, the Guide for the Solitary, there's still books I've got on my bookshelf. There's still books that I delve into now and again. Buckland's Big Blue Book of Magic is literally sat just there behind me as a reference guide for this podcast, because there's lots in there that has become indoctrinated now. It's become the dogma of Wicca. So for me, I've always been aware of that. So from your deep dive then, so if somebody's listening to this, and obviously if they've heard our podcast in the past, they know that we are not, you wouldn't be coming here for Wiccan witchcraft. You wouldn't be doing that. Wicked witchcraft maybe, but not Wiccan. So how would you sum up kind of how Wicca started from the bits that like give us the Cliff Notes version of what Wicca is, how it started, from your knowledge, from your recent knowledge.
I mean, Wicca is it's fairly modern. I mean, it was in the 1950s, wasn't it, that it came about, when Gerald Gardner, he started off in a coven in the New Forest, and he went and started his own in, what was it, Bricket Wood, apparently the coven was called. And he was a traveller who tended to, he liked to go to different kind of communities and see different religious practices, and he read a lot about Crowley and theosophy and spiritualism and Masons, like Freemasons, and he kind of got really attracted to all these different elements of different religions. But there was a book, I think, by Margaret Murray in the 1920s, and she had this theory about the ancient witch cult, and the idea that the witches that were burnt in the witch trials, hung, whatever, in the witch trials, that they were descendants of like an ancient pagan pre-Christian religion. I mean, that's been debunked now, apparently.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah. So this whole idea that, there are descendants of this religion. So he was quite into that. And Margaret Murray also talked about, oh God, what's it called? Duotheism?
Yeah.
I can never do all the theists. But yeah, she said that there was evidence apparently of these ancient witch cults favouring a horned god and a mother goddess. And the idea that they represented, like, Horn God was the male, the masculine, and represented things like nature and birth and death cycle and virility. And then the mother goddess, of course, you can guess what she represents. You know,
Shopping,
fertility,
makeup.
yeah, just the usual
That.
fertility and nurturing, and all
Having the
that.
Horns God's dinner on the table when he came home.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
kind of
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. She had this idea that there were these two male and female gods, and Gardner was also into that, and decided to elaborate on that. And he was really into the idea that men and women, like the yin and yang, and there's a god and a goddess, and all that. He was into that. So yeah, he kind of put all these different religions and his beliefs together, and he started his coven. I mean, at the time, he didn't come up with the word Wicca or Wiccan. It was apparently his rival, I can't remember his name, who came up with it. But he did refer to his coven as the Wicca or something like that, to mean the wise. And then kind of, obviously, down the line, it changed into Wicca. And he kind of came up with these basic ideas, started getting a bit like, all right, these are the set beliefs, these are the rules that he kind of built on, and kind of what Wicca is still based on today. Like, it obviously there's it's pagan based, so it's a lot of nature, working with nature. Still carries the whole like duo theist thing of male and female. Kind of tend towards quite ceremonial things that we're kind of familiar with, casting the circle and different tools, and working with the elements. But then there's also, he came up with like the Wiccan laws and the Wiccan Rede and the 8 Wiccan virtues and the threefold thing. And he kind of got a bit, he
Carried
got
away.
he got a bit carried away. Yeah, he did. But
Some
yeah,
would
I mean,
say carried away. Some
yeah,
would say tyrannical. I mean,
yeah. I mean, there was, I mean, there's, yeah. I mean, from there, obviously, people started kind of branching off from there. I mean, Doreen Valiente, I never know how to say her name. She was the high priestess of the coven, and she took a lot of issue with a lot of these set rules and things like that. And she went off and had her own, views of these things, and wrote books, and she had her own thing. And then obviously Maxine Sanders, they came out of that and set up Alexandrian Wicca, and it just goes on. There's just so many different types now. That's, I think, the basics. I think. But yeah,
things you
just like,
haven't covered are
okay.
things like Gerald Gardner was a really interesting character in and of himself. And he when he was doing a lot of the research for like the Enochiad stuff, he liked this idea of the Knight Templar and all of these secret societies and things like that. So he was very into all of that, gentlemen's clubs and things. He was also a nudist. And so a lot of the we must work skyclad because it is healthier is because of his own beliefs in nudism and naturism, sorry. And his own beliefs that, people should be naked. But he also, by all accounts, was a bit of an old perv. And I know there's going to be people listening to this that will go, "Oh no! How dare you speak badly of?" But he was, there are things which would not fly today, and there are things which most Wiccans have rolled back on in their practices, because some of it is very suspect looking through a 2025 lens, and things like initiations into the coven, and that being with a fivefold kiss, which is, you know, the face, cheeks, the breasts, and the genitals, that wouldn't necessarily fly. A lot of people took umbrage with that, quite rightly so, because, you know, it's one thing to follow an occult practice. It's another thing to be indoctrinated into a cult. But yeah, he was. I'm glad you've found it interesting to go and do a deep dive, but have a look at the man himself. He's there's some proper darkness within his story, but also his path changed throughout his life, and he, as you said, he laid down rules as people were kind of going, you know, and a lot of what he laid down that other people then sort of ran with also kind of became a little bit meandering, a bit like the podcast, but it shifted a little bit in its rules and in its sort of its own beliefs. And of course, as then that was viewed through different lenses by Doreen Valiant, by the Farrers, Janet and Stuart Farrer, who wrote this rather interesting poem, The Witch's Bible, which is actually, I love the title of it. I think it is such a fantastic title, even though I thoroughly don't follow 95% of what's in here. But yeah, I think you've knocked the nail completely on the head in terms of how it all started. So did you look much into Alexandrian and the differences?
I did a tiny bit, because I remember like a while ago I kind of asked around the mods, I said, can someone explain it like I'm 5, what the differences are? Because to me it seems like Alexandrian was similar in its structure, like the things that they did, and but it seemed like they were a bit more eclectic, and they had more ceremonial things, like, and they added in like Enochian stuff and
Very
Vala,
Enochian,
and like they added in that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know much else really about it, because they're the two big ones, aren't they?
Yeah, but again, Alexandrian, you're quite right. As much as Gardner was really interesting, because he was trying to make out that this knowledge was directly linked to traditional folkloric witchcraft, and of course it wasn't. He created most of it. He allegedly recreated, but he created most of it. And what Alexandrian did was to look back at snippets and fractions. That doesn't sound right, but anyway, bits of Enochian and ceremonial magic, which is where we get things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the Kabbalistic cross that has come across into sort of standard witchcraft. Both of those are parts of my own personal practice that were just what I learned. And now in the winter solstice video that I did, you can see me doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and also the Kabbalistic cross and the 5-rayed star and all of that, because that is where my I guess my instruction, where my learning of how to cast circles has come from. So for me, that's what I call my bells and whistles. That's where, if I want to tap into a particular type of circle casting that I know is different to what I normally do, and it's far more of a ceremonial mindset, that is what I do. But again, as an eclectic liminal witch, I pick and choose, and, you know, I do it on the high holy days, as much as honoring the people that I worked with and the people that I learnt that with, as it is honoring my own past, as it is honoring, you know, it's more than going through the motions. It is actually
Yeah.
it's a bit like wearing your Sunday best to church for Christians. Do you know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah.
don't turn up at church in the mucky, oily overalls you've been cleaning your car with. You go and at least have a bit of a wash and put a clean t-shirt on. And it's that sort of thing, for me, that it's that sort of equivalent. It helps me get into that headspace more than anything.
Yeah.
But
I think that,
but it is
yeah.
really, when you look at the difference with Alexandrian, it is really interesting because there is a lot more. There's It's really weird. As much as they were trying to step away from the Gardnerian rules, they imported a whole bunch of other rules that
Yeah.
are basically
Oh,
very,
yeah.
very similar,
I
just different.
I read that Gardnerian, they had something like 30 laws, and then the Alexandrians had 161.
Something like that.
I didn't, it was something wild like that.
Mhm.
I mean, the thing that I found interesting, like going back to what you said about ceremonial stuff, is how Wiccans kind of have a very broad spectrum of kind of belief in, kind of ceremony being a thing where you don't actually have to believe. It's almost like it is pageantry, and
Mhm.
you can use that as a cathartic, experience, or you can full-heartedly believe literally in it all. It's just all about the kind of experience, and then you can take from it what you want. Like, it seems like
Mhm.
Wiccans have very different interpretations of what they do, and
Mhm.
there's some Wiccans that believe in things that other Wiccans don't. I mean, it's
Mhm.
that big that, well, there's got to be room for that. But I found
Yeah,
that interesting how
absolutely.
that's just, you don't have to go literal with it, apparently. So yeah, but I mean,
But
I know what you mean. Yeah.
even if you do, there are, within the Wiccan umbrella, there are so many. It's like the Christian umbrella. There are so many
Mm.
denominations
Yeah.
within Wicca. There are so many different versions of it. Because, as you
Mm.
said, Doreen Valiente, she immediately went, "Oh, okay, I get where you're going
Yeah.
with this, Gerald, but actually, I'm going to separate off and do my thing." And this is where you get the idea of covens, hiving off. So the
Yeah.
idea of a coven is that you would have however many members, and the high priestess would teach somebody else and basically train them to be a high priestess of their own coven, and they would go off and hive off
Mm.
and create a coven where they're following the same rules and it's following the same. So that,
Yeah.
again, allegedly the idea was that you would have a coven book of shadows, and each coven would write that by hand, and each coven member would have it by hand. But then what you would have is there would be specific rights that that particular
Mm.
coven would create,
Yeah.
and that would be passed down, so that effectively it was almost like a family tree. And
Mm.
initially I think that was very much the idea, was that, this follows that, follows this, follows that, and you could kind of see the delineation, again, almost like a pedigree dog, where you can go to Crufts and, not Crufts, but the Kennel Club, and you can go, right, its parent was this one, that won 3 awards, and that one's grandmother was that dog, and then that dog. Do you know what I mean? You can trace
Yeah.
that lineage.
Yeah.
And with a lot of early Wicca, that was very important. And these days, because now we have information overload, like, and because these days the idea of referencing your sources no longer matters to most practitioners. That's where you get this really eclectic idea of what Wicca is, and it's kind
Mm.
of all become more of a melting pot. So I see people talk about, casting a circle, and some people will say, "Oh, well, you must call the quarters," and it's like, okay, that is the term "call the quarters" is Alexandrian. It's
Mm.
very much. and oh, you're calling the watchtowers. Now that is straight Alexandrian terminology, but you're
Okay.
using it and you're calling elements
Yeah.
in a similar way, but
Okay.
that wouldn't have been the watchtower, and
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
the interpretations of what these things are has blurred over the years. So there is, because more information's become available, there isn't that thing anymore of, right, I belong to the Bramble Coven, and the Bramble Coven hived off the I don't know, the Thornbury Coven, and the
Yeah.
Thornbury Coven hived off the Black Ash
Yeah.
Coven. But we know our path and we know our history. There isn't that
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And so
I
there isn't
found.
that way of
Yeah.
looking back.
Yeah. I found that interesting, kind of, because I mean, if it started in the 1950s, Gardnerian, and then shortly after, I can't remember when it was, Alexandrian, maybe a decade later or something like that.
Yeah,
Two,
I think it
maybe.
was within 10 years.
Because I mean, it was around the time of like the
60s,
Witchcraft Act,
early
wasn't it?
60s.
That it kind of that
I
he started.
think the Witchcraft Act, off the top of my head, it was either 51 or 53, and I can't remember which
Yes,
one.
it was. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, that's when he started.
That's when the book came out. Basically, the repeal of the Witchcraft Act happened, and I think it was within 6 months, Gardner's book dropped.
Yeah.
Because there was talk of the Witchcraft Act being, basically, again, if you don't know what the Witchcraft Act was, it was an act basically making it illegal to practice witchcraft. Although there was never a definition of witchcraft in the law, it was just, it is illegal to be a witch and to practice witchcraft. Okay. Which is because there wasn't a definition, is how they got women in villages that were acting as midwives or acting as the local, herbalist, is how they got them for witchcraft, because they were obviously doing witchcraft. It's obviously witchy stuff. It's, how else would you know that a dock leaf eases the pain from those nettles? How would you know that? It must be witchcraft. So within the UK, within England, but the UK government, there were moves to repeal that act. And of course, people like Gardner and the other occultists at the time, they all knew this was coming, because they all hobnobbed with members of parliament at the same gentlemen's clubs. So they knew that this was happening. Some members of government are or were alleged to have been part of various magical groups, and whether that was ceremonial Knights Templar type based or Enochian type based, or whether that was, going to the same nudist colonies as Gerald. Allegedly, we all know what governments get up to behind closed doors. But all of that was happening. So of course, Gardner had an insight, an inner knowledge, almost like insider trading, into knowing when this was going to drop. So he had that. So his book was the first, closely followed by several others, and then you had people like Sybil Leek coming out in the 60s and becoming a well-known TV witch in the 70s and 80s, and when she moved to the States and things. And so I love talking about our history as the history the history of the craft, because I find it really fascinating.
I find it interesting, like how it evolved. I mean, because it came out of the Witchcraft Act, and then it was the 60s, Alexandrian, and then there was a big witchcraft resurgence in the 70s, and then
the 80s hit with Satanic Panic.
Yeah, but there was a couple in the 70s as well called Blue Star and Odyssean or something like that. I think
it's Odyssean. Yeah.
And then there was one that combined Alexandrian and Gardnerian called Algard. So it was almost like they just took bits from
merged the two. Yeah, that's pretty much what they did.
So I love kind of when things kind of evolve and people take issue with some things and like some things, so then they make theirs. And I think it was I can't remember if it was 60s, 70s where there was Dianic as well, Wicca, where women took issue with, where women took issue with, the male and female thing, and they were like, well, because I mean, there's another thing with Wicca is you can choose to kind of see, because this is the thing, is like with the Horn God and the Mother Goddess, it was like a secret for a long time about, well, who are those two people, and I think it was kept a secret, and then I think he came out and said it was Canunos. How do you say it? Canunos.
Yep.
And
it's Cernunnos, Canunos, all of them.
Aradia, I think. And
then
when
Aradia,
yeah, and then when that came out, it was kind of like they started going, oh well, now actually we're using these two and these two, and you know, I think there were people who said, well, some Wiccans that would say, well, they're all the same. They could all be same. They're just an archetype, and they just represent the same energy. And then some people said, oh no, they're all separate. So that you kind of had like pantheism and monotheism going off. But I can't remember if Dianic was more just kind of, they just worshipped the kind of mother goddess side, I think. Maybe
Dianic was following Diana, which was I believe, oh God, I get the two confused, either Roman or Greek. Somebody in the
Roman, I think,
comments will know. But one, yeah, Roman, Greek, some pantheon.
one of them.
And they basically just went, she is the mother goddess, and everything comes from her. Very much as a feminist movement. It's interesting that Dianic witchcraft came along at the same time as like the early feminist uprising, because people were going, why is there a horned, why if the high priestess is, why is the priest doing all this, why are we following a priest? Why don't we just follow the high priestess? Why, what? And so there was a kickback against Gardner putting that in his hierarchy, having men at the top of the hierarchy, and so Dianic was an attempt to basically usurp that. But what you then had is it's really interesting when you look at it, because you had people going, okay, well now we're using all of these Roman and Greek names. So as you said, are all of the female gods and all of the male gods, are they just separate gods, separate deities that are all up on Olympus or whatever the other ones believed? Or is it just one goddess and she appears in multiple different forms as Apollo, not Apollo, Jesus, as Aphrodite or Diana or whoever, and is the horned god just appearing as Apollo or Zeus or whoever? And so then you had arguments within the Wiccan culture about which pantheons do we follow. That is what I now see very, very, very distinctly online, with people espousing the Wiccan faith and the Wiccan, that they are following Wicca, that they are witches that follow Wicca, coming down on other witches within pagan spaces and saying, you shouldn't do that. Don't you know the Wiccan Reed says...
Legend has it that it was written by the Dark Ones.
It is coming. Necronomicon. Strange tales of the supernatural and the unearthly, when the fabled Necronomicon unleashes his ancient secrets.
The secrets of the Necronomicon do not come cheap.
Necronomicon.
What's in the basket? Easter eggs?
So yeah, when I looked at all the laws and the rules and everything, and it kind of reminded me of why it's never gelled with me, is because coming from a Catholic background, I was used to all the ceremony, the rules, the way to live, all of that. And that was what initially put me off witchcraft in the first place, was reading the Witch's Bible. And it's a lot. There's a lot of rules, a lot of ways to live and the things that you must follow and all of that. So yeah, it initially put me off, and I wasn't really sure Well, I just knew that I didn't want to go down that kind of road again, really. And when it came to when I was in the IoT, and even in something that was to do with chaos magic, there was still form, and there was still, kind of hierarchies and set kind of rules and conduct and secrecy and all that kind of made me think of things I'd read about Wicca, and it it kind of got to a point for me personally, it wasn't for me doing it in such a structured way. I'm very happy doing my own thing.
It really surprised me when you were talking about the IoT and you were saying how structured it was, and how there was this hierarchy, and there was all of these rules and all of this dogma that you had to follow. That really shocked me as somebody who'd never been part of a chaos community. My understanding, or I guess my presumption, was that there would be some sort of following, some sort of teaching equivalent, but that largely it would be personal practice and personal experience. I never thought it'd be like, here are the 15 course books, go and follow these.
Oh, there was a bit of that, but I mean, the thing is that, there was obviously a lot of wiggle room in the IoT.
Mm-hmm.
I can't knock my time in there because I learned a lot. And I guess that's kind of a bit like Wicca, really, is because there's a lot of elements in it that witches do use, and or people who have been in Wicca and they take that away and they're like, well, I don't like that bit, don't like that kind of way of thinking about it, and change it. So it's kind of all, in that way I can't really knock Wicca, because it's obviously people get something from it, and they're obviously free to do it their own way, or even if they are into structure and they are into participating in certain things, then that's good for them.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's just
absolutely. And I do know that for a lot of people, that structure is quite important, and that structure gives them an understanding of how to practice witchcraft and how where the boundary lines are. I just think that for me personally, if you want those boundary lines and you want to follow the rules and those laws and all of that, then you go down the Wiccan path. Interestingly, in the Witch's Bible, we talked about this earlier on today, but this isn't like I did have a copy of this back in the day. I got rid of it, and then this has been donated to me from Patricia, one of our mods on the channel. She's downsizing her library and upsizing my one. But this was written in 1981, and the Faras were very, very close to Gardner. They were part of his original covens, and were very much part of that scene. Although I don't think they were there at the very outset. I think they came slightly after. But anyway, they were talking about how Doreen Valiente, when her book, the first one she wrote, Witchcraft for Tomorrow, that had started to delve into some of the that had started to delve into some of the secrets and some of the mysteries, and to give some of the to basically lift the veil a little bit off of witchcraft. And they were talking, it says here, already like Gardner before her, she is both praised and attacked for her initiative. For ourselves, we welcome it, the new book. Since Stuart published What Witches Do 9 years ago, we have been and still are flooded with letters from people asking to be put in touch with a coven in their locality. Most of them would be unable to help, so in future we'll refer them to Witchcraft for Tomorrow. It says the need is genuine, widespread and growing, and to leave it unsatisfied for reasons of secrecy is negative and unrealistic. This phrase. Interestingly, what Doreen Valiant has done for Gardnerian Wicca in Witchcraft Tomorrow, Raymond Buckland has done for another tradition, Saxon Wicca. And the book, the Buckland's Big Blue, that I refer to quite a bit, this is another version of a form of Wicca. But again, this is a witch's Bible. This is the complete book of witchcraft, neither of which define themselves as Wicca, although all the way through it is very clearly Wicca, not a general witchcraft practice. But the Faras then say, however, to each his own, it is presumptuous to be too dogmatic from the outside about other traditions of the craft. So in 1981, they were already trying to say to people, let's not be dogmatic if other people do not follow your version of witchcraft, which is really interesting, because the fact that had to be put in a book in 1981, when from the Faras, directly following Gardner, directly following all of this, is absolutely astounding to me, because we are now, that's 44 years later, and people are still having those conversations on social media. I am a member of various witchy type Facebook groups and other groups and things on various social medias, and invariably, as a liminal witch, I see things that are interesting to me. So I see something like, so this was a comment, and I'll put these on screen when I do the editing. Somebody did put a post on saying that, all of this information being freely out there, this is a little bit dangerous, should we be sharing all of this? So somebody then replied, and it says, yet magic is for all, but real protection just for the ones who praise the Most High in the celestial realm. Those who call bad energy upon innocent people will pay back anyway. As some people already said, only the evil folks will get harmed. And I would say the weaker spirit too. So be strong, try not to worry, keep your head up. And I read that and was like, only those who, the ones who praise the Most High in the celestial realm. What?
God.
But then other comments, somebody had said, again, this has me very concerned. Now that the information is available to all, what's to keep these innocent people from getting hurt? The reason the instructions were originally kept hidden was because of this very problem. Now the profane have magical powers. Innocent people are getting hurt with no recourse to the law. Are we responsible for making the information easily accessible? The bigger picture for the future looks like everyone can and will abuse the power, and all will be harmed. I'm hoping I'm wrong, and that's why I'm posting this. I'm hoping someone will explain how I'm wrong. This is a sincere concern. Hopefully it will be taken as such. It's like, okay, so you basically want to take all magical knowledge, because some people... And then in the comments, this is on another post where somebody was talking about a souring relationship spell. So it's baneful magic, but they wanted to sour a particular relationship. So they had a lemon, filled it with stuff, pierced it with pins, left it in a place. And it said, let me know if it fails. I won't hesitate in throwing curses or invoking demons on said person either. Right? So that was like, okay, you've gone straight from lemons to invoking demons on people, but okay. Somebody else said, so the exact opposite opinion in the same witchy open witchcraft group said, anything you do will come back threefold. Hope it's worth it. And if your husband was that aggressive, then maybe she was sent by the universe for a reason, because the husband had had an affair. So it's like, okay, one person saying, if this don't work, I can chuck a demon her way. And the other person, oh no, it will come back threefold. Somebody else just put, do what thou will, if thou harm none. It's like, yes, okay. Somebody else, can't wait to see the eventual repercussions of this bullshit. So her husband cheated on her, and she did a working to sour that relationship with her husband's mistress, because the husband cheated on her, but she's going to get the bullshit. Okay. Somebody else, same here. This truly is not the Wiccan way. Really? Since when did we all become a bunch of namby-pamby? Oh no, let's just this woman's husband cheated on her, and she did she didn't cut his penis off. She didn't cut up his clothes. She didn't scratch up his BMW. She didn't sell his favorite whatever. She did a working from the heart, using, which is quite a traditional working, using a lemon to sour situation, where she put things in the middle like honey and also dead flies and whatever else she put in the middle, and pierced it all the way through. That's like quite a traditional hexing, like I'm getting my revenge. It's like that is going to sour the relationship. It isn't saying to the woman, she could have gone, the woman who's cheated with my husband, I curse you for heavens more, and I'm going to send this 7 tons of magical shit your way. But she didn't. She cursed the relationship that her husband had was cheating for. Didn't necessarily want to get back with him, but didn't want him to be happy with the new, whatever. Personally, I wouldn't necessarily have done a working in that instance. I'd have gone, you cheated on me, you can go and F yourself, and I hope you're happy with her. And you know what? I'm going to give you none of your stuff. Like, you can take your stuff, but anything that's mine, I'm taking, and I'm going to live a very happy life and watch you fall apart, because if she's cheated with you once, you'll cheat with her with someone else. Do you know what I mean? And I might have done a little working, just give him a wandering eye, keep his eye wandering rather than it being whatever. But at the end of the day, I don't see a problem with what she did. She's an individual that got hurt, and she hit back. But the comments, and it says somebody else had done a similar thing, and we're like, oh, I use this and randomly throw them anywhere, as in they dispose of them anywhere. And then the comments were like, how many relationships are you trying to wreck? Why are you aiming it at strangers? Because they were disposing of the spell. Like, they just threw it somewhere, it would rot down, the pins and things through it would just be, in the whatever, go into the soil or into the side of the street and get washed away or whatever. But the amount of, like, one of the comments on another post, somebody had done a working. It says, damn, you're going to get a huge karmic kickback, but you'll probably just blame it on someone else. And then somebody's put a comment on saying, I don't believe in the threefold. This is a good spell. And it's like, yeah, no, I actually agree. I thought that was quite a nice way of doing it. I envy that you can. I wish I had the heart to take matters into my own hands. I know more than one who really deserves a dose of their own medicine. But if that is all you're doing, that is, to me, that isn't baneful. You're not causing somebody. It's like, I know somebody, when we've talked to mirror spells in the past, I got a message from somebody who was like, you really shouldn't be sending that energy back to them. What? I'm sorry, if someone's chucking negative juju in my direction, they are going to get it back, and they are going to get it back with a little bit added kickback and spite thrown in there. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you throw a physical punch at me, I will return that punch. I may return it with an added kick as well, but I won't go out of my way to punch or kick you. But if you hit me first, I will hit you back. And it's so, damn, you're going to get a huge karmic kickback. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is, I think, I don't know. It's just strange how Wicca has got these kind of rules in that kind of flavor. But as I was doing my reading, I kind of realized that, well, Gardner kind of, he was trying to make the practice of witchcraft a kind of more palatable thing by calling it Wicca. And then obviously it got a lot of publicity, and so, the kind of reinstatement of, well, we only do right hand magic, we only do white magic, and kind of when they got kickback about, oh, well, you do skyclad rituals, and then, but I mean, and also just to do with like sex magic, and then going, oh, well, we just do it symbolically with the athame and the chalice. It was all kind of a lot of, what's the word? Just kind to soften it, soften witchcraft to be kind of accepted, and saying, oh, well, we have these laws about not doing dark magic and not doing curses and things like that. We're not like other witches, you know. It was very much like that, and I feel like that kind of attitude is continued, I think, in witchcraft, and especially in Wicca.
Oh,
Is
absolutely.
this whole idea of kind of not being like other witches, and I'm a good witch, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's funny when it all just comes up in comments online, because it's like, well, who are you? You know,
There's a lot of that.
that's where it's
There is a
like.
lot of that. But no, I think, do you know what? I like that. I like this idea of Gerald Gardner going, right, we can't call ourselves witches. What are we gonna, how can we claim that this comes back from the ancient witches, but not get the media to see us as a witch? How can we do
Yeah.
witchcraft but not be a witch? Because witches do this and they poison apples and stuff. How can we do that but not be that? And it's whitewashing. It is absolutely whitewashing. It's all of that
Yeah.
I just go, it's bullshit. What you're trying to do is you're trying to stop people making the decision on that based on their own ethics. You're trying to put a moral code that is going to be a blanket moral code for everyone that says thou shalt not do this. And for me, I think personally, I have very strong ethics. My ethical code, my moral code is very strong within me. There are things that I absolutely categorically are fundamentally wired into my DNA of the type of person I choose to be in my life. And the vast majority of that is to be a good person. But that doesn't mean I accept and I take bullshit. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I am a good person, just don't fuck with me, because I have a line, and if you cross that line, you'll fuck around and you will find out. And you know, I think for me, the Wiccan rules are about abdicating your own individual responsibility, because what you're saying is, I can't take my vengeance, I can't take my revenge, I can't hit back, I can't you know, do anything because the rule says this. And that to me is from a place of fear. Whether you are fearing the universal kickback, the universal karma, or whether you're fearing your own potency, it's, to me, that isn't, I won't listen to that bullshit, because it sounds like bullshit to me. You know, I can't, if it wasn't for this damn Wiccan read, I would curse the hell out of you. Really? Would you? Do you know how? Like, would you take those personal consequences when that curse does what you aim it to do, rather than just being angry in the moment? Would you actually take those personal, you know, responsibility for that? I question. So what about you? Where do you find your, like, where is your ethical moral code, and what do you know, how do you view that Wiccan read, Wiccan laws and all of that? Like, where are you on this side of the fence?
I mean, I've talked about how, I probably have before, about I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I kind of always say that Catholic school is a factory of guilt and shame for children, and it does affect people for the rest of their lives. And it took me maybe up until 10 years ago to get that out, where I still believed that things like curses would come back on me. You know, if I'd done a hex, and then if something bad happened to me, I'd be like, well, that's because of that. You know, it's because I've been scarred by feeling guilt and shame for a long time. What it took was reading the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, and he pointed out that a lot of the kind of Wiccan rules and witchcraft rules are just Christianity just redressed, basically. And that kind of really clicked with me, and I was like, yeah, why am I carrying over these Christian kind of morals and putting them into my witchcraft. Like, I thought I was over this shit. This is ridiculous. I'm not letting that come back in another form. Like, I find that ridiculous. So, kind of a few years ago, I just kind of went, no, don't come back. Whatever I do, don't come back. And then from that, I've never had anything rebound because I haven't looked for it, because that is my belief.
Yep.
People's belief, they can think differently. But for me, I could do a curse like every day and that would not come back, because I do not believe that, and I refuse to believe that.
But that's the key thing, isn't it?
That is mine.
But that is the absolute essence of magic. That is the essence of what witches do, is that the key thing is that our will, our intent changes the universe, and we do various things and use various tools and crystals and herbs and whatever else. Whatever you use are just tools. It's our intent. And if part of your intent, if part of your fundamental, again, belief through your DNA, like through the middle of a stick of rock, and it's that fundamental to you that it will not bounce back, and that you have the ability to cause change that will not affect you negatively directly. If that is part of your particular belief and your particular intent and your particular magical practice, then it's written into it. It's, you know what I mean? It's part of it. Therefore, in the same way that you wouldn't then listen to, I don't know, John chapter 7 verse 9 or whatever quote from a Bible is, you wouldn't listen to that and make that part of your practice. Again, the Wiccan rule and the Wiccan read and the laws and this, that and the other are also not part of your practice. And I totally agree. I don't tend to hex and curse and use baneful magic, because I think, to be honest with you, I'm too bloody lazy. Someone's got to really be like really piss me off for me to take that amount of effort. And 9 times out of 10, I will let the universe take care of any retribution. I might give it a little nudge, but I'm not going to go and waste my time in gathering all the ingredients and the herbs and everything else and sitting there, because for me, if I'm going to do something baneful, I'm going to do something baneful. And that takes as much preparation for me as doing a positive working. I still need to set my intention, think long and hard about it. What are the repercussions that may or may not happen? What is my actual intent? Do I actually intend for, it's easy to say, oh, I wish you'd go and fall off a cliff. Do you actually mean that? Because the potential for that is that person may die, they may get injured, and then die from that injury. They may have life-limiting injury. Like, have you actually thought through what falling off a cliff means? Because if you just say, oh, I hope you fall off a cliff, you're just saying it. If you actually do an active working and put all of that effort in and basically go, yeah, I will not feel guilt if that person falls off a cliff and dies, or falls off a cliff and breaks their leg and dies of blood poisoning, or falls off a cliff, like whatever happens, you are accepting responsibility and or accepting that you have altered somebody else's life in that way, whatever comes up of it, and you are accepting that. That takes a lot of gumption. That isn't just a wish you'd fall off a cliff. So for me to sit there and do something hexing, baneful, something like that, it would have me go through all of those repercussions and think about it all. Am I so affirmed in my belief that this is the right thing to do, that I am willing personally to take responsibility for all of those actions that can come from my spell working, from my curse? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, no, do you know what? I can't be asked. I cannot be asked. Not even 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100. But there will be a time occasionally where it feels right for me to take action. If I have been wronged so so vehemently or so wholeheartedly, if I have, if somebody has put their all into attacking me, I will first of all use defensive magic, which I don't think is baneful, but I will also, if that isn't working, I will put something else into it. And that is, it's a bit like it's a bit like a slap on the wrist. You know what I mean? And I won't necessarily go for the jugular, but if a slap on the wrist isn't going to hurt, isn't going to take effect, then I will scale it up. And it isn't something I do regularly. And even talking about this on this podcast, I'm thinking, should I even admit to doing any of this on the YouTubes? Because, what people are going to come out of the woodwork decrying what I do, because I've dared to admit that I occasionally will use a bit of baneful magic. I can honestly say in the last 12 months, I don't think that's a lie. I've done one baneful. I know, right? I've done one arguably baneful. It's a binding and hexing. If that person does XYZ, this will take effect. So it's more of a, it's not, I'm coming after that person. It's like, if you do this, these are going to be the repercussions of your actions. And that was one in last year. And it was absolutely called for. And that working has had absolutely its desired effect. And the result is I am very happy with the result. And I have no qualms in feeling that way. So what about you? Like, where are you on that liminal grey line of sort of hexing or cursing or baneful or whatever you want to call it?
God, that's a big question. The thing is with me is that as a chaos magician, I cycle through a lot of beliefs and models and things like that. I mean, I've talked about it before about I generally work on a psychological model where a lot of my magic is catharsis. Oh, yeah, it's cathartic. So I see it as this is my way of kind of getting out my feelings, and whatever happens. And if it does, then it's quite nice, isn't it? It's a bit of a bonus. But for me, primarily, it is an act of catharsis for me. So I do what I do, and I enjoy doing it. And then if anything comes out of it, then it's a bonus. But for me, it's therapeutic almost. So, but that's just my way of working, and that's the model that I kind of
I mean, I do try and practice active forgiving, which I think is really important, because it's all too easy if somebody is within sort of the magic realms, whether that is whatever version of witchy behavior, whatever the magical practitioner does, if you are able to affect change, it can be very simple to throw hexes and curses everywhere, a bit like in the film Practical Magic, where the little girl says, I hope you get chicken pox, and she effectively curses the little boy. It's like, it's very easy to do that. It's very easy to be driving down the street, someone cut you up and you go, oh, I hope you crash a car, or and it's not that throwing your hand up will curse them, but it's very easy for that to become, if you've got somebody in your life who is constantly pissing you off, it would become very simple to go, actually, this person's pissed me off for the last time, I am going to do XYZ. Well, actually, they're just an annoyance. It isn't something that you need to, necessarily go down the hexing and that route for. And that's something that I believe, again, it's like, I was about to say all things in moderation, but yeah, I kind of believe that, not everybody that pisses me off deserves to have, dark juju thrown at them. not everybody.
Well, yeah, I'm not.
You know,
I'm not cursing anyone who's like barged in the queue
yeah,
or
exactly.
anything
Yeah,
like that.
someone,
You know.
used the trolley just as you were getting to it, or took the last can of Coke off the shelf just as you were reaching for it, or whatever it was. The last discounted box of Quality Street in the supermarket. You know what I mean? You're not going to sit there and go, right,
That's very
I know,
specific.
I've now pulled a strand of your hair and I have a tag lock and I'm going to do this, that, and you just can't be asked.
Yeah.
But also I believe very firmly that it is beneficial to the practitioner 9 times out of 10 to forgive those smaller those smaller crimes, if you like, those smaller things. If somebody's pissed you off, you could spend all of your energy like throwing it back at them and doing this, that, and the other, or you could just say, well, they're obviously having a bit of a shit day themselves, aren't they? They're obviously in a bit of a shit place. I wish them the day they deserve. That for me is one of my favorite hex cursing baneful terms of phrases. I wish you the day you deserve, because go for it, universe. If they are acting like a prize dick to every single person, the person in the shop, the person in the coffee shop, the person behind them in traffic or in front of them in traffic or whatever, if that person's acting like a prize dick to everybody they meet, I hope they have a really shit day, because that is the day they deserve. Mm-hmm. If that person is having a really lovely day and is cordial and polite to service workers and all the rest of it, I hope they have the day they deserve. Not everybody, and again, this is I think where some people who write those sorts of comments on social media about the Wiccan law and the read and all of this stuff, I think that's where people misunderstand, because for most practitioners that I know that do use some form of baneful magic, even if it is only binding, because I've heard people say that just binding someone from causing harm, as in the bloody craft, but just binding someone or trying to stop them from harming themselves is intrinsically baneful, because you are taking away that person's free will, which I find interesting, because those same people tend to not have a problem throwing around love spells, which again, you go, oh, but it's for love, isn't that lovely? Well, no. If the person that you're aiming that love spell at has no interest in being with you or that person or whoever, then you are again going against their free will, just because it's in the name of love. How is that any different? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it all boils down to when witches try and put their morals on you and kind of want you to play by their rules, and kind of gatekeep you from doing that. Like, it's like, well, everyone's practice is different. We should just be seeing it like that. And it's like, well, why do you care that a stranger on the internet, oh, it'll come back to you, or it'll have a bad repercussion? It's like, you don't know them. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's so silly. Like, it's the same thing as like people saying, oh, if you do that, the devil will get you. It's just the same. It really is the same.
So one of the things that a lot of the early books, not just the Witch's Bible, but a lot of the early books talk about, is this idea of there being the perfect balance with a god and a goddess, and how in covens you have to have the high priest and the high priestess to represent that perfect unity. There is never any discussion around same-sex couples. There's never any discussion around trans or non-binary people, and it's very, very limiting in its scope, because it is very hetero cis normative. Now, what do I mean by that? Is literally it is written by and largely telling that the only people that witchcraft is for are straight and non-trans or non-gender diverse people. And my argument has always been, and I've been told this actually by a lesbian at a pagan event, where she basically said I should not be able to practice because as a trans person, I should not be able to be allowed into the women's only section of a pagan camp, because as a trans woman, I do not know enough about her experience and the experience of the goddess. And my reply was actually, well, I mean, the person that was running the event also came into my defense, which was amazing. But my response has always been, actually, as somebody who has crossed that line, as somebody who has lived part of my life presenting as male and is now living authentically for the last half of my life so far, presenting as female and living authentically as female, that authenticity is something I cherish and challenge anybody to live by, because it's bloody hard, but it's something I will never give up. But also, as a trans person, I have experienced life in those two gender extremes. And I also have non-binary friends who also exist and are also practitioners, and talk about their own journey and finding that they themselves can represent the ideal god and goddess, because they hold the idea of there being multiple genders within them. And that, for me, actually, if you are going to be incredibly pedantic and say that there has to be a perfect unity between male and female, surely a trans person who has lived part of their life as one and part of their life as another is that ultimate unity. Because how else you're combining the two as the all. Surely as a trans person, we are that. You know what I mean? Like, we know that more than others. And that's even without talking about the amount of homophobia and biphobia that is within a lot of witchcraft practice, and specifically Wiccan practice. I mean, what in your deep dive, in your research, what did you find any queer people?
I mean, what it is I think because they just had this rigid idea of male and female, and the idea that magic was powerful if you kind of had a, high priest, high priestess, or you had, mother goddess, horn god. It always had to be about these two extremes. And back in the day when I was kind of getting into witchcraft, I wasn't quite sure on my sexuality at the time. I didn't know whether I was gay or bi at the time. And I asked someone who was Wiccan, and I said, well, where would I fit in as like a gay person? And he just kind of didn't really have an answer for it, And when I looked into it, I read about Gerald Gardner, and he just thought that kind of gay union in that way wouldn't produce magic. He always thought there had to be a male and a female, and that perfect union was what was powerful. So he basically said that gay people can't perform magic, just full stop, because they don't have the male and female union in their life. And the idea that he said, if we were to introduce gay couples into these kind of rituals, that it would invoke the curse of the goddess. That's how extreme his thoughts were about it. He thought it would anger the gods to kind of have like two men or two women, or whatever. And that was kind of a thing that Doreen Valiente took a big issue with. She just thought it was ridiculous. And kind of later on in her life, she kind of talked about the inclusivity and just this absurd idea that, so you're saying that gay people aren't magical, their magic doesn't work just because they don't, it's so ridiculous to think about. And I imagine that by coven, there's probably like Wiccan covens that they're probably quite broad, probably open to it. I mean, for me back yeah, back then, you know, I kind of thought, well, as someone gay, bisexual, I just saw it as, well, you know, I mean, if you kind of put it a bit crude, then, well, I'm kind of embodying kind of male and female kind of characteristics in me. So why can't I tap into, why can't I be part, you know, why can't I represent the high priest or the high priestess, you know, if it's about pairing. But it was recently when, I think it was 2022, there was these individual reports. Well, it was like this big report, and there was a number of people who signed it who said that within their own covens, it was still very biological sex, like essentialist, which kind of shook kind of the big Wiccan groups. Like, oh no, well, that's not a thing, and apparently it still is, sadly. But I think you've got to keep in mind that it is going to vary from place to place, really. I imagine in any coven, really, you know, the viewpoints on that are. But, you know, it's still, I feel like it's a very dated way of thinking about having man, woman. That's it. There needs to be those two. But I'm still making my way through this. Gay Witchcraft by Christopher Penczak. Never know how to say his name. But this is kind of covering his like life as a witch, grappling with that idea as a gay man, and how he kind of rethought and reshaped his practice, you know, because he has a lot of Wiccan elements in his craft, and how he kind of tweaked it and his thoughts about it. And I'm still making my way through it, but you know, that's proven to be quite an interesting insight.
There's a good reason why in some societies in history we were the seers. You know, people that were queer were the ones that had the knowledge. We were the wise people. We were the witches and all of that within those groups. But yeah,
because it reminds me of there was a ritual that I did in the IoT, and it was about, well, it basically came down to, we needed a balance of men and women in this group ritual. And it came down to just, there were a couple of odd numbers. And so they just kind of went, well, who wants swapping over? Like, and there was kind of like a guy who was like, well, I do drag. Okay, right. Oh, I could jump in with the women, you know. And then there was like a woman who was like, oh, well, you know, I feel like I kind of want to fit in. Oh, yeah, I want to be with men, actually. So it was quite cool in that way, where in the IoT, it was just very like kind of fluid, like, oh, well, we'll just make up the numbers. Oh, we need one. Oh, how are you feeling today? Do you want to be the man or the woman, or, you know, that kind of thing. So that was cool.
Trust the chaos magicians to be fluid with
yes
with gendered stereotypes. Yeah. Thank gods and goddesses for the chaos mages.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a bit sad, really, I guess, that some of these kind of Wiccan rules have kind of stayed around, and I think, yeah, it's just it's a bit bizarre, but it's you know, it's evolved in some ways, but
it has.
It's just fascinating.
It has, but again, in some ways, the teachings that were perhaps best thought of as guides have become almost commandments.
Yeah,
and that is where I think, ooh, you know, I don't come preaching at me within a witch group online, which literally is, you know, we are for all witches of all paths. Don't come preaching at people in the comment sections saying that you know, this is not the Wiccan way. This is not the Wiccan way. I'm sorry, you're not Mandalorians. This is not the way. This should not be done like that. You know, the whole point of this group is that it's open to different paths. and you
Yeah.
coming in and basically saying that your way is the only right way, or your rules are the only rules that need to be
Yeah.
adhered to, smacks of fundamentalism. And if we wanted
Yeah.
fundamentalism, you know, we'd quite happily go back to Catholic churches, wouldn't we? But anyway, I've enjoyed this discussion, Neil. We've been filming for nearly 2 hours. So I've got a hell of an editing job to do to get this this chopped down. It's probably going to be a bit of a mammoth episode.
Mm.
So for everybody watching this at home, let us know your thoughts on this subject. Where do you sit on this idea of dogmatism within the witchcraft, the wider witchcraft community? Let us know if you are somebody who follows a Wiccan path. If you think we've been wrong in some of our assertions, let us know in the comment section. I will be the first person to say that I will read your comments, and I will not be deleting comments unless they are incredibly disrespectful. That's the same with all of the videos on all of my on both of my channels. But feel free, let us know your thoughts, let us know your opinion. It would be fascinating to hear people from other paths. Obviously, as a sort of eclectic liminal witch and as a chaos mage, you've got our opinions. But if you are somebody out there who is a practicing druid, or if you are somebody out there who is from an Alexandrian path, let us know your opinions. Let us know down in the comments what your views are on this. But also, if you have got this far, don't forget to give us a massive old thumbs up. That really helps us out on the channel. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ding your bell so that YouTube lets you know each and every time we go live, which will be Tuesdays and Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. UK time, and 6 p.m. for the members. I have to get the plug.
If I've got anything wrong about Wicca, then I'm sorry. It was just me with some books out taking notes, so I'm sure I've probably got some little bits wrong. I've probably generalized a lot of things, but I'm always learning. I'm always open to learning. I'm always open to being corrected. I just love knowledge, occult history. Just, correct me. It's fine. I love it. I'll take it on.
We will be back next month with another podcast. Let us know if there's any topics you would like to hear us cover. This is us getting into a little bit more controversial territory, which we don't mind. But I think the way to end it for this month's episode is just to repeat the quote that Neil just said, courtesy of Doreen Valiant. So Neil, over to you.
Okay. I think this is the really good thing to keep in mind when it comes to witchcraft discussion in general. She said, "What we need now, more than anything, is for people of spiritual vision to combine together. If only people in the occult world devoted as much time and energy to positive constructive work as they do to denouncing and denigrating each other, their spiritual contribution to the world would be enormous." I thought that was very poignant.
Yeah. And with that, all that's left to say is keep practicing.
Keep experimenting.
And we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.